piece of software that watches everything you do online. Every search, every click, every website, recorded, sent to another person, packaged up in a report, to parents and bodies of churches throughout the United States. It's marketed as love. It's marketed as protection. But to many of its users, to many people who've lived under its control, it feels a lot more like surveillance. It feels a lot more like control. And for many, it feels like the start of a lifelong fear. This is the story of Covenant Eyes, an app that turned purity culture into a business and reshaped human lives far beyond the screen.
Covenant Eyes really tries to present itself as a tool that can be used for accountability, for protecting your family or your loved ones, and to maintain purity. It promises to help marriages survive, to make sure that families are safe and healthy, and to guide the individuals that use their program towards more moral online behavior. At first glance, it does sound simple and helpful. All you really have to do is install the software, let it track your online activity, which we all know we're being tracked anyway, and then you share the reports with an accountability partner that you get to choose. The idea is that by monitoring the behavior, the app can prevent temptation for people on the internet. And ultimately, they say that it does keep people on track. But what it actually does is a lot more invasive, and the applications can be deeply concerning. Every website you visit, every single search you make, and every time you click the mouse or download something, it is tracked. All of this information is collected and sent to another person. This could be your spouse, your husband or wife. It could be a parent, even a mentor at church. It could be one of your friends. And we just call it an accountability partner, which means that somebody else also has access to all of your online activity in detail, and that every small action becomes part of a report. What starts as guidance quickly becomes a system of oversight, one that can generate a lot of stress for the users or their loved ones who have to monitor their accounts online. And many people find the app overwhelming for those exact reasons. The constant awareness that someone is watching you, on top of believing that God is always watching you, creates a certain type of hypervigilance that is really hard to shake. It becomes very easy to monitor yourself obsessively. You might think about every click you make, whether or not it would get flagged. You might think about every thought that you've had and what led to those searches, and every mistake that you've ever made in your entire life. You wonder if curiosity itself is a form of moral failure. Is it just you actually searching those things, or is it you wanting to search it? You begin to see your normal human behavior, your normal human impulses, as behavior that is destructive to you or to your loved ones. And the app doesn't just track behavior, it definitely reinforces the fear, which in my opinion is why they have a small level of success. And because it is sold into the Christian culture that already teaches fear and guilt as acceptable tools for moral education, it is accepted by the masses. In fact, many people even embrace Covenant Eyes.
I have Covenant Eyes. I let people see what I do on my Instagram. It wasn't triggering those accountability spaces. And so I think the kind of brass tack takeaway for me has been the way that the enemy will seek to destroy and devour me probably isn't going to come to the door that I'm staring at, which should make me more diligent about guarding my life and doctrine, which should make me more anxious about kind of long-term plans, because the devil's not in any hurry to destroy me and slander the name of Jesus. Super patient in how he goes about doing that. And so one of my big takeaways was to be more mindful, maybe than most because of the position that God's put me in, of where there might be weaknesses in how I've built protections around me.
I want to let you know about this application which will really help you in your battle. The name of the application is called Covenant Eyes. Now, Covenant Eyes is an accountability software which actually works to censor all sexually suggestive content on your phone, your PC, your tablet, whichever device that you have. And I believe you can install it on up to 12 devices all at once. And it's really good. Another feature that Covenant Eyes has is the accountability partner feature, where you can actually choose someone to be your accountability partner. And what the app will do is it will send screenshots to that person of the past few websites that you've been on and the screenshots that you've been on your computer over the past few hours, so that they can see what you've been doing, because accountability is so important to have.
To really understand why Covenant Eyes exists, you do have to look into the culture that created the demand for it. Purity culture in evangelicalism is not just about waiting until marriage or following a very specific set of rules that will keep you pure until your wedding day. It's an entire system that makes you feel like your sexuality, the desire that you experience, or even your body itself is dangerous and something to be afraid of, something to cover, something to hide from others. Young people are taught that the temptation alone is them having moral failings, and that natural impulses that are given to them by God are actually an evidence of their weakness, that they aren't strong enough to withstand the temptation, and their value is directly tied to how well they're able to obey, or at least how well they're able to publicly look like they're being obedient. Mistakes are oftentimes treated like a moral stain, even ones that are private, and it will make people feel like they're broken or unworthy. We hear this talk about sexual brokenness all the time when we see videos on purity. When it comes to purity, we hear about sexual brokenness all the time. This system is enforced through multiple different channels throughout your life. It might be enforced in youth group lessons, Sunday school classes. It could even be in the sermons, the lectures. You might see it in books. You might get ads popping up online.
Every superhero has strengths and weaknesses.
Scorch Man.
Strength, fire. Weakness, fire extinguishers.
Catman.
Strength, always lands on his feet. Weakness, laser pointers.
Hamster Man.
Strength, he's in a giant hamster ball. Weakness, he's in a giant hamster ball. And there's me.
Colossal Man.
My superpower, strength. My weakness, porn. Bet you didn't see that one coming.
No one ever does.
And this is my buddy Jeff.
Yeah, but you can call me Wingman. I mean, I can't fly. I'm just super supportive. So just call me Jeff.
Just Jeff.
Look, some people feel like porn doesn't negatively affect them, but if you're like me and you've struggled to get away from it, here's how I did it. All right, so my story, I was 12.
You might be surrounded by groups of people who have purity rings on. Teens are asked to think about their sexuality and make these types of promises about their future behavior when they're at a very young age, and they're sometimes even required to confess their thoughts or their impulses to their parents, their mentors, or their friends in the church.
Adolescence is supposed to be messy and filled with trial and error. Adolescence is supposed to be filled with curiosity. It's supposed to be filled with awkward moments and mistakes. But imagine trying to grow up when every click, every search, every question you have could be seen, judged, and publicized by someone else. When your room isn't just your room anymore, imagine growing up in that environment, where ordinary curiosity becomes something scary, detrimental to you and your loved ones. Where wanting to know, wanting to explore, wanting to be even just yourself is a monumental problem because someone is always watching. And suddenly growing up isn't just about growing up anymore. It's about learning how to be publicly palatable, how to monitor yourself, how to become okay with ritualized humiliation, shame, and anxiety. How to live a normal life despite being constantly monitored not only by God, but also by covenant eyes.
Having dinner with a good friend of mine who happens to be a client of Barna Group. Towards the end of the dinner, she referenced that she wanted to get home because she didn't like to leave her 16-year-old son home alone, which seemed a little odd to me, right? I thought, well, that's maybe what you do, but I said, well, what's the deal? And she said, because he struggled with porn, and we really just hate to leave him alone as a 16-year-old. And I said, well, you're trying to monitor his screen use, or like, what is that about? And she said, no, actually, he wants us around. He has talked to us about the problem, and he doesn't like to be left alone. It's not so much our choice, although we're happy to help him, but he's asking our help. He wants us to be a part. He wants a relational solution to the problem that he is experiencing. This, to me, is a perfect example of my hope. There's transparency about pornography use.
A lot of times, journals can be monitored, internet history watched, and questions about desire are shot down. Curiosity is almost always going to be treated as a threat when it comes to sexual topics. The idea is pretty simple. The idea is that you can't trust yourself. If you come from this type of background, this won't be shocking to you. But this really does have an impact. People can't trust themselves, and so then they have to rely on external oversight, which is where programs like Covenant Eyes come in. If young people are taught that they have to fear their own thoughts, their own sexuality, their own desire, if parents are convinced that their children can't be trusted to be alone on the internet or with devices in general, then a tool that monitors their activity, creates reports for them to easily figure out what's going on online, and enforce accountability in their household rules feels like a really good idea. It seems logical even. It's marketed as a safety measure to protect you and your family. What could be bad about that? But for many people, it does become a source of stress for obvious reasons. It can cause people to experience a lot of self-doubt and shame. Constant notifications, the reports, and the reminders amplify the same exact fear that purity culture has been trying to shove down our throats for decades, probably longer. Users start to really get obsessive about every single online interaction that they have, and every moment of curiosity or even just clicking on the wrong link, and I'll give examples of this later. All of that could get included in the report and could result in a discussion with their accountability partner.
That though, is there any merit at all to some sort of punishment involved in looking at pornography, whether it's for having looked at it or whether it's for having hidden it? Is there any sort of merit to a punishment at all?
Well, that's a complicated one.
Sure.
Because as a general rule, if it's your first time becoming aware of the fact that the kid's looking at pornography, I would likely take the responsibility of the approach that, son, I just want to apologize for not helping you. Better be prepared to facing porn. This is likely more my fault than yours. Forgive me. I want to try to make things right. It's my fault for not warning you better and teaching you how to handle this. And so I would start with that approach. And then as long as you keep the alliance going, and where the punishment needs to come in is if the kid has somehow got around the software, right? If the kid has, lied to you after you've had the discussions. Right now, if they lie to you about, I didn't know, I don't know, and oh no, until you be honest, you're going to be grounded. Like, no, don't punish at that point, because you want to build the alliance. Where there is clear defiance after clear discussion, there's where you can say, well, listen, yeah, you're going to be off your phone for 2 weeks or whatever. Or you're going to, you're going to have to come to your mom and I if you want to use a computer, even for schoolwork. And you know what I'm saying? Like, you may have to put some kind of limits like that. Stay away from punishment in the early until it's clear that the foundation of expectation is clear. And then after that, when they're clearly contravening it or going around, whether it's the software or some other way, then I would start including consequences.
Purity culture and programs like Covenant Eyes don't just shape your behavior, it really does shape how you view yourself. It changes your identity.
Where periodically captures screenshots of your screen activity and stores them securely on your device. At advanced artificial intelligence analyzes those screenshots on your device for explicit imagery. The software rates the images, blurs them to protect your privacy, then prioritizes them based on content. A report of concerning activity, circumvention attempts, and other activity is sent to you and your ally.
When you're in this culture, self-worth becomes linked to being compliant, obedient. Value is tied to how well you're able to perform for the church, and desire is treated as a weakness. Failure at all is almost always equated to moral failure, and this doesn't just stop when somebody deconstructs and walks out the doors of the church, or when they decide to abandon their original Christian culture. Former users of programs like this report that they experience lasting anxiety, lasting guilt, and that they have to compulsively self-monitor themselves still years later for fear that someone might find out, even though once you're off of the Covenant Eyes program, that's really not a problem. Covenant Eyes is just one software, like many, that is part of a much larger ecosystem that monetizes Christians' fear and guilt and shame. The app doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's a technological extension of a culture that already has been teaching self-surveillance. It's the extension of a culture that already teaches moral policing. So by embedding oversight into the software, it amplifies the anxiety and the level of control that were already normalized in their everyday life.
Majority of Christian leaders are keeping silent about this evil that is destroying the minds and hearts and souls of children, teens, and young adults.
No other problem affects more people in the church. This material is more aggressive, more harmful, more violent, more degrading and damaging than any other time in the history of the world. And this generation is dealing with it to an intensity and scale no other generation in the history of the world has ever had to. A difference can be made. The church can be restored if people are willing to do something about it.
This was normalized through sermons, through pledges, through the youth programs. It kind of transforms your own fear into constant digital oversight, making people feel perpetually observed, and causing people to feel like they are being forever judged and measured, that they are constantly morally failing and constantly falling short, and being constantly humiliated, frankly. This program is something that is deeply humiliating to a lot of people.
Dad had Covenant Eyes installed on all the computers.
Covenant Eyes was a magnificent thing that if you ever went to a website
what if
that
we were
was
sponsored by Covenant
that would be so
So guys, this episode's
funny.
brought to you by Covenant Eyes.
But if you went to a bad website, every single week it'll send all the sites that were visited on the internet, your internet service, to an email. But then it'll show you all the red ones, the flagged ones. And so if you visited a porn site or a gaming site that had porn games or something on it, high red, and then your dad gets to go to the site and see who visited, but they wouldn't know who did it.
He might even get an email that day if it's red enough.
Yeah, I know. If it's bad enough, he'll come into your room that minute and be like, what are you looking at right now?
To understand Covenant Eyes fully, it's really important to look at how it's marketed and how it's been presented to Christian communities.
Covenant Eyes markets itself as a tool to protect you, a tool to keep you accountable, and a tool for your moral guidance. But the way that it advertises itself online has drawn criticism from a lot of people, including myself. The ads paint a perfect picture. There are smiling families, happy bedrooms with couples sitting on beds, and there are children playing in the yard while parents are watching. When you're scrolling through the website, it feels reassuring, but if you take a closer look, then the messages start to get more complicated. The core of the advertising strategy that Covenant Eyes uses is fear. Ads often say that curiosity is something that can spiral into moral failure. They frame desire itself as being dangerous. They say that their software is the only solution for you. This approach might be effective from a marketing perspective, but it also weaponizes the shame that Christians are oftentimes primed to feel. Users are told not subtly that without their tool, they or their loved ones are going to be at risk. Pastors, church leaders, and parents of teenagers might appear in their advertising, their videos, or print ads talking about how their lives changed for the better. This just goes to reinforce the idea that using their software isn't just responsible, it's actually morally essential. For Christian and evangelical audiences, this messaging taps into their existing beliefs about purity culture, about being obedient in their sexuality, and about the importance of self-surveillance when it comes to accountability. This makes the app feel necessary rather than just optional. A program that blurs lines between protection and manipulation, abuse and care. It presents itself as a tool to keep your family safe, but the strategy makes its money off of your shame, your continued fear, and your lifelong guilt. This makes the emotional impact of the app a larger product than the software itself.
On the surface, Covenant Eyes promises protection, accountability, and moral guidance. If you go on their website, you'll find a lot of different testimonials. There are testimonials from pastors, from different churches, and even parents that want to reinforce this idea that the software is completely necessary for the safety of their home, that without it, their spiritual health could be at risk. When you look at the website, you can see pictures of families or people that are young couples smiling, and they seem happy and really secure, but this whole website, the whole idea of this frames surveillance as care. They say that monitoring your children is how you should love them and that accountability is your moral responsibility. And to a degree, I agree with some of those things. There is definitely a line that Covenant Eyes crosses. Covenant Eyes, in my opinion, also reflects the much larger evangelical approach to tech and morality in general. We're living in a culture with Christianity today that teaches that desire is dangerous, that teaches that you can't trust your own impulses, and that frames technology as a tool for oversight. In this way, software very quickly becomes an extension of parental control, God's view into what you're doing, pastoral authority, and even just the Christian cultural fear that's developed. By embedding this type of oversight into your everyday life, it will teach people that freedom and privacy are something that are dangerous and needs to be only managed very carefully. It really furthers this view that you can't trust yourself, that the flesh is sinful, and that you, left to your own devices, will do something terrible, horrible, and wrong. That your behavior on the internet is hurting your family. And of course, I'm not talking about people that are truly doing things on the internet that are illegal or harming other people. We're talking about people that are just everyday people using the internet. I just really want to make sure here that you guys recognize in this way how technology can truly amplify this already existing pressure in Christian culture. I want you guys to understand how moral oversight is a product that is being sold and how the church also sells this idea, and how ordinary human desire, ordinary human sexual development are treated as a massive threat. Yes, I think that the app is wrong. I think that the program, the software is wrong. But I do think that it's just a symptom of a much sicker, larger system that controls people's behavior in a million different ways. And this is just a very clear look at it. When you look at Covenant Eyes exactly placed in this culture where it is, we can see that the impact is not just technical or something that is like a structural within your home type of thing, because it does impact users mentally, both the person who is being monitored and the person monitoring them, even though in a lot of cases they monitor each other. Your accountability partners, not just one monitoring the other. In theory, apps like this are supposed to create a sense of responsibility and support from your community, but in practice, they actually just reinforce anxiety. Accountability partners oftentimes can react in ways that are not clinically recommended when somebody makes a mistake. They can react judgmentally, and users can also then internalize that judgment towards themselves, and the result is constant surveillance, like I've said.
All right, I'm here today to share with you my funniest purity culture memory. If you don't know what purity culture is, then you did not grow up in evangelicalism or have much experience with it. Google it, check it out. It's terrifying. Here's my funniest story. So when I was a young teenager, my parents installed Covenant Eyes on our household computer. And Covenant Eyes is like the software that keeps track of everything that's done on a computer. And they did it in secret. They didn't tell anybody. And then about a week later, they confronted me and said they knew that I was addicted to pornography. And I said, I'm not addicted to pornography. They're like, no, we know that you are. We have Covenant Eyes. We have the proof. And I was like, show me the proof. What are you talking about? And they showed me a list of my search history. There was one entry, and it was the bare naked ladies. So tell me your funniest purity culture memory. Put it in the comments or use this for a video, jumping off point, and I want to hear all the stories.
People might monitor not only their behavior at that point, but also their thoughts and trying to anticipate how other people are going to perceive them at the end of the day. Covenant Eyes does also try to promote itself as being an educational resource for people struggling with porn addictions. It provides them allegedly with resources like webinars and community content that try to reinforce the purity culture messaging that we've all heard for decades. These materials try to emphasize a lot of moral vigilance, practicing extreme levels of self-control, and taking radical accountability. They try to encourage their own software users to see the technology as a moral extension of themselves. How creepy is that? And as a tool that actually prevents temptation. Nothing about Covenant Eyes prevents temptation, in my opinion, as somebody who previously used it, not by my choice. I wanted to go through their resources section very thoroughly to truly understand what they had available. And some of the content does seem decent as far as like a blog style thing would go. I think genuinely probably anybody could write these types of blogs. It doesn't take a therapist or a licensed professional to know what they're saying. That being said, I did have to share this one with you guys because I do think that it goes to show their mindset on things. This was one of their recent podcasts, which is sharing with people what edging is and telling them not to do it. I feel like they shouldn't be giving people new ideas. The software does not provide people with any sort of guidance or coping skills or even an intro class on what types of things they should avoid to not get flagged. Users are not taught how to actually manage their desires or impulses or taught to assess what's normal or unhealthy. They're just taught to fear it all. And while you do obviously agree to give up your privacy by using it, I do think privacy here is a big concern because while Covenant Eyes does try to situate themselves in the market as being very protective for families or individuals, I think it raises a lot of questions about consent or boundaries or just personal autonomy because a lot of times the users can't really say no. These are put on school devices at work. These might be put on your personal cell phone and computer by your parents, and it isn't something that people have to opt into in this way. For example, I didn't really care that we had Covenant Eyes growing up, but it totally creeped me out and it definitely stressed me out because I did get flagged for watching inappropriate things on the internet, like Tosh.0, for example, got flagged as pornographic content. So even though I literally not one time ever looked up anything bad while I was in high school, I still had conversations with my parents triggered by Covenant Eyes inaccurately flagging things as being pornographic or inappropriate or whatever it may be. And then the other thing is also that you don't know necessarily which device it's coming from. So the parents, or when you go to the school or whatever, maybe they've improved it now where you can do it by device, but we just had it for our whole Wi-Fi. My understanding was that it was just on our Wi-Fi. So it really didn't matter who was accessing it. It was getting monitored. And now I kind of think it probably was on all of our devices. You guys understand what I'm saying? There's some things and level of engagement, but I think having a software doing all of this like hyper intensive hyper intensive monitoring is a bit different. If my mom, I knew that my parents, for example, they always reserved the right to go through my texts growing up, and I didn't love that, but I felt cared about that they reserved that right because they never did it. They never ended up doing it. And so I felt like they care about me, they care about me enough to want to check in on me and to let me know that if they start to see some weird stuff going down, then they might look at my text messages, but they never did. And I think that is much healthier than just saying, well, we're just going to monitor you 100% of the time, even though we trust you, because it makes you feel like you're not trusted. It makes you feel like you are constantly doing something wrong. And as a young Christian girl who truly cared about purity and saving herself for marriage and cared about what I set my eyes on or what I would think about, it wasn't that I really cared, and like, you know, authorities at the time would say, if you're not doing anything wrong, it shouldn't matter. It's not about doing anything wrong. It's about feeling like you're constantly being picked apart and watched to see if you're going to do something wrong. I think that it's important to give people trust first. I don't think that you should just install this on the internet. And I also think that it is a little bit weird. And I mean, no disrespect, because I know that people do not have this motivation when they're installing it on the internet. But I personally cannot imagine having a child and wanting to do that. I get having a kid and monitoring, generally speaking, their internet behavior. And I think that that's good. I think if you don't, in a way, like monitor, does your kid in the 5th grade have social media? Like, is your kid probably shouldn't be on Reddit in the 3rd grade. At that time, I truly just had a very positive and pure relationship with the internet. And so nothing bad was going on, but then still getting confronted by misframing of things or being asked, well, what is Tosh.0? And not even knowing because it auto-played after my previous show on Hulu. Like, it was deeply distressing to me to have somebody come to you upset, accusing you of masturbating in their home. Like, bizarre. I would encourage you not to do that. I think that it is odd. I think another reason that I think it's weird is that I have been accountability partners for people before. This is something that's super, super common in Christian culture. I'm sure if you guys grew up in the church, you have experienced some form of this before. But when I was 18 years old, I got paired up with a 16-year-old who I had never met before to be accountability partners, and they came up with the plan that every time, I'm not laughing at them, this is like a pain laugh, because I'm just like, this poor person was a great person who was just trying to do their best and was following the model provided for them. So this isn't to say that, like, this person is not weird. They were doing exactly what they were supposed to do. But I already had started just kind of mentally thinking about some deconstructing topics. I knew that I didn't necessarily agree with, like, the church's view on masturbation and things like that. And so she asked me if I could be her accountability partner, which would entail every time that felt like she wanted to masturbate, that she would instead call me. And this made me so uncomfortable. And I just felt like, whose idea was this? Like, who told this minor? And I understand it's a 2-year age difference, you guys, but to me, it doesn't matter. I was an adult, she was a minor, we were newly introduced. Now she wants to call me every time before she masturbates. And I understand the idea is it's not like she's calling me because it's sexual. But that's awkward for me. I don't want you guys to call me if you feel like you're going to masturbate. I'd rather have you just, like, do it and not involve me. Like, I don't mean to be punchy or disrespectful with any of this, but I'm trying to explain, like, these are the real life situations that people are engaging in. I really want you to pause here and think for a second about what it actually means for kids to be partnered with adults as accountability partners in this context. Sure, on paper, this might sound like something normal that a church does, or they're just opening up conversation. It might just sound like a simple idea. Adults do hold each other accountable, and in churches, there's a lot of discipleship from adults to children, and so this could make sense. But when you actually get into the idea of an external adult holding responsibility over a child's sexual exploration, or a child having the ability to view, or not as much the ability to view, but the actual forced viewership of what this adult is viewing online.
A company called Triple X Church, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of it, but they have essentially designed a spyware that you would put on your computer. And it was called Covenant Eyes. And I would put Covenant Eyes on my computer, and then you'd assign someone as your accountability partner. And they had access to all of your browsing history. Now, the person that I was accountability partners with was also an elder at the church, and I think they thought that they had like found a loophole into how to look at stuff on the computer without me finding out, his accountability partner. But Covenant Eyes knew, because I would get a report directly every week of like all the stuff that he's been looking at. And I've got to be honest, didn't bring it up to him once, did not want to have that conversation, and still don't want to have it.
I think you start to get into murky territory very quickly. Kids are not emotionally equipped to handle that. I would say like 21 and under when I say kids, not emotionally equipped really to be doing that. They're still figuring out how to set boundaries at that age. You're still figuring out who you are. You're still figuring out your sexuality and what you are comfortable with and uncomfortable with at that time. Suddenly, they're not only expected to open up themselves in that way, but also to provide judgment to someone who's older in a position of power for them. To discuss with an adult the adult's private sexual fantasies, intentions, what they're doing on the internet. And obviously, it comes without saying that this can backfire in a ton of expected and unexpected ways. A kid might feel pressured to overlook something that is inappropriate, which I think the whole situation is inappropriate, just to avoid conflict or to avoid looking like they don't want to repent or they don't want to be accountable. I think that it can really blur the lines between true mentorship, accountability, and with control, ultimately. And if your parent is the person who is your mentor in this case, or your accountability partner, I think that it can really twist the parent-child relationship. Who wants to grow up and think about all of the conversations they had with their parents about what they were doing in the privacy of their own bedroom? Even if we're talking about teenagers or young adults, I think that the emotional load is pretty heavy here, and it's inappropriate to put adults in the position where they feel like they're being spiritually called to sexually mentor a child. Watching somebody else's behavior constantly, having to analyze it every day, and having to schedule discussions on the reporting, I think that that could make anybody feel hyper aware and stressed out in ways that they shouldn't have to be. You should never feel like you're living in a fishbowl. And at the same time, while they say that this can build intimacy, emotional intimacy, I think that it definitely ends up just eroding trust because people don't like to feel like they're being watched. Whether you're Christian or not, the ethical takeaway here, the main point that I'm trying to make, I think is a pretty simple one. If you're going to have an accountability partner and do this, do it with another adult or somebody else. If you're a teen, don't watch my stuff probably if you're a teen. But I'd have to think about that. Probably don't if you're a teen. But yeah, find someone that is age appropriate for you. It's the point. Find somebody that is age appropriate for you to do that with. I'm not hating on anyone that feels like they need extra support in this area if they're voluntarily putting it on their own devices, doing this with their men's group at church. I don't care. I don't fault you for that. That's fine. I think that is probably the only fine positive application, assuming that you're not being pressured into it. Just do it with someone that's age appropriate, you guys. If a teen comes and asks you to be an accountability partner, you should direct them to the youth group, to another child, to maybe the pastor to help them find somebody else that can do that, but you should find somebody that's age appropriate. Boundaries on something like this should be extremely clear. You should trust that person an incredible amount, and privacy for each other should be respected at every single turn. Communication should be super open and empathetic and never ever judgmental. There was even a politician who shared openly that their son was their accountability partner.
Within your home. And so why is that such an effective tool? Why do parents need to put this into their home?
Yeah, that's great question. We probably could have called this more appropriately a war on the darkness of technology, because there are some good things with technology, of course. I mean, the Bible apps we all love. We broadcast our services, on our social media, and there's some very positive things, but there's also, as Clint's pointed out aptly, some really dark things. So Covenant Eyes is the software that we've been using a long time in our household. I first learned about it at, I think, a Promise Keepers event in the early 2000s. I think it was developed in about the year 2000. But it's the largest accountability software that there is, and there's some paperwork out there on the table that I think everybody may have picked up on the way in. If not, go get it. It's a subscription-based. I mean, we don't make any money on this. I'm telling you, we use it. Okay, I'm endorsing it because I'm a user. It's about $15 a month, $16 a month, something like that. And you get up to 10 devices. And what it is accountability software. So men in a church, men's Bible study groups will do it. That's how it's presented at Promise Keepers. But they also mention, hey, when your kids become teenagers, especially if you have boys, dads, they're talking to the guys at this event, you might want to think about doing this with your sons. And so we've been doing that. And so what it does real simply is it has an algorithm and software. It's way above my head how it works, but it scans. You obviously opt into it, but it scans all the activity on your phone or your devices, your laptop, tablet, what have you. We do all of it. And then it sends a report to your accountability partner. So my accountability partner right now is Jack, my son, right? And so he's 17. So he and I get a report of all the things that are on our phones or all of our devices once a week. If anything objectionable comes up, your accountability partner gets an immediate notice. I'm proud to tell you my son he's got a clean slate, all right? Yeah. But we get a report and it says, hey, no activity of concern, and it's really sensitive. It'll pick up almost anything. It looks for keywords, search terms, and also images, and it will send your accountability partner a blurred picture of the image. And so on occasion I get one. I was just looking at the one from this week. I got on Jack, and it said, This is the only one that may be questionable, and it's this blurred image of two women talking in a live screen thing, and I zoom in and I have to unblur it, and it's two middle-aged teachers.
So imagine going and having these conversations with your dad, with your son, it sets people up to feel like it sets people up to be in awkward situations where it is inappropriate by nature, frankly. It just is inappropriate. That should not be happening. I do think if somebody truly is struggling with some sort of an addiction and does need to cut back on their habits or needs someone to monitor the internet, then that's something that should be cleared with a therapist. I don't think that your parent should be your accountability partner. And I would say for teen boys, it is most common for their dad to be their accountability partner. And in youth group, when people confess on confession nights, every single time there are boys that are like, I masturbate or I watch porn, and they confess that and sob in front of everybody at the youth group, and they're super encouraged to do that. I think it's so wrong. I think that's a point where leaders go, hey, we've missed the point. We need to make sure that these kids know that that's developmentally normal. The masturbating part, that's normal, that they don't need to be ashamed. But no, instead what they do is go,
yeah, that's really bad. That's really bad. You're so young, and that's really bad. Probably won't have a normal marriage. I think you need an accountability partner. If you're actually repentant, you shouldn't have a problem with that.
And then they make them go call their parents and tell them. So now not only does the whole church know and everybody that is friends with the people at that church, but now your parents know and they're monitoring your internet use. We see so many examples of people using this software in ways that I find completely inappropriate and in ways that I think we should condemn at the end of the day. I personally think that softwares like Covenant Eyes are expressing the absolute worst parts of purity culture. Covenant Eyes has faced pretty significant scrutiny over the years because of the way that it collects people's data. The Covenant Eyes software tries to monitor users' online activities, like I've shared, and that includes taking screenshots every minute of what they're doing online. This includes tracking their browsing history, and they even do share this information with the designated accountability partners. Is a very high level of surveillance, and a lot of people in the media have raised alarms about user privacy and about consent, especially for those who are minors or in a church. Maybe they're using a school laptop at a Christian academy. In any other context, this would not be appropriate. It shouldn't be appropriate. In one really large case about this, there was a probation department in Indiana that had used Covenant Eyes to actually monitor a family's information, their website history, their browsing data during a pretrial release. Dude ended up back in prison because of Covenant Eyes, and I understand once again that isn't their intended purpose, but it just makes you think about the far-reaching impacts and the far-reaching applications that a software like this can have.
Hannah got a call from her lawyer. There was a warrant out for her husband's arrest. Her thoughts went straight to her kids. They were going to come home from school and their father would be gone. It burned me, Hannah says, her voice breaking. He hasn't done anything to get his bond revoked, and they couldn't prove he had. Hannah's husband is now awaiting trial in jail, in part because of an anti-pornography app called Covenant Eyes. The company explicitly says the app is not meant for use in criminal proceedings, but the probation department in Indiana's Monroe County has been using it for the past month to surveil not only Hannah's husband, but also the devices of everyone in their family. To protect their privacy, Wired is not disclosing their surname or the names of individual family members. Hannah agreed to use her nickname. Prosecutors in Monroe County this spring charged Hannah's husband with possession of child sexual abuse material, a serious crime that she says he did not commit and to which he pleaded not guilty. Given the nature of the charges, the court ordered that he not have access to any electronic devices as a condition of his pretrial release from jail. To ensure he complied with those terms, the probation department installed Covenant Eyes on Hannah's phone, as well as those of her 2 children and her mother-in-law. In near real time, probation officers are being fed screenshots of everything Hannah's family views on their devices, from images of YouTube videos watched by her 14-year-old daughter to online underwear purchases made by her 80-year-old mother-in-law. The family's entire digital life is scrutinized by county authorities. I'm afraid to even communicate with our lawyer, Hannah says. If I mention anything about our case, I'm worried they are going to see it and use it against us. Covenant Eyes is part of a multi-million-dollar market of accountability apps sold to churches and parents as a tool to police online activity. For a monthly fee, the app monitors every single thing a user does on their devices, then sends the data it collects, including screenshots, to an ally or accountability partner who can review the user's online activities. For Hannah's family, their Covenant Eyes allies are 2 probation officers in Monroe County's pretrial services program, charged with scrutinizing their web activity and ensuring that Hannah's husband does not violate the terms of his bond while using one of his family members' devices. Covenant Eyes doesn't permit its software to be used in a premeditated legal setting, such as monitoring people on probation, according to its terms of service. But public spending documents, court records, and interviews show that courts in at least 5 U.S. states have used Covenant Eyes to surveil the devices of people who are awaiting trial or released on parole. Neither Covenant Eyes nor multiple officials in Monroe County responded to repeated requests for comment and detailed questions about the app's monitoring. While the use of Covenant Eyes in a criminal legal setting likely only represents a tiny fraction of the hundreds of thousands of people under court-ordered electronic surveillance, the stakes are still high for those required to use it. The app's accuracy could determine whether a loved one lives at home or behind bars.
Obviously, legal experts who have any sort of morals definitely criticize this kind of application. I think that if you're so unsafe that you legitimately need to have your internet monitored by legal organizations, you probably should not be out. So people don't think that this is really a great idea, nor is it ethical, especially in the case of this one guy where he went out and he actually did follow the rules of his probation and Covenant Eyes just flagged him anyway. Another pretty big issue is that they market themselves saying that they block inappropriate sites, but it really isn't that hard to get around it, get around their systems, and it's really not good at identifying all the sites. You might have some of the major sites with adult content blocked on it, so like OnlyFans might be blocked, Pornhub might be blocked, but Other than that, you're probably good to find things. You can still go on Reddit, you can still read smut, you can whatever, okay? There are a ton of loopholes in this. Even really basic fixes like using private browsing modes or just obviously like taking off the Wi-Fi using cellular data, all of that makes it easier. Additionally, if your kid has something like an iPod Touch and you haven't installed the Covenant Eyes onto like literally every single device, it is very easy to get around. I think one reason that Covenant Eyes is becoming a bigger name in modern evangelical culture is first because so many of us grew up with it and now we're adults and we're talking about it, but also because more public figures have been talking about it. I did show you guys that video of Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, where he shared that he has his son be his accountability partner and to go through their stuff. And he did report that his son has never had a bad red flag, which means nothing to us based off of what I just told you about the effectiveness of this software. That definitely sparked a lot of discussion in the public sphere about what is appropriate in parenting, what is appropriate to have your children do. Is that even morally, like religiously accurate? Just talking about privacy as well, consent practices. So when you look at a program like Covenant Eyes, it does present a pretty complex intersection of modern technology, of not respecting individuals' privacy, of pushing religion, and of basically destroying personal autonomy. Obviously, it can have those things in some cases, but I believe that in most cases, this is being used for like children or employees or spouses in a controlling manner, not just for individuals wanting to stay true to their own convictions. It really couldn't be more clear to me at this point that Covenant Eyes is not just a software to prevent temptation. It's a product designed to enforce surveillance, to increase fear and shame, and to monetize anxiety. It's something that we should look at and reflect on the state of Christianity today, and also we should be aware of the consequences for users. There may be an appropriate application for a software like Covenant Eyes. I can't think of one. But in most cases, we should be aware of the harms. Studies show that constant surveillance, especially in your formative younger years, can have truly long-term consequences. Fear or anxiety or shame-based monitoring does teach that privacy and autonomy are something that is risky to engage in, and it encourages internalized judgment. It encourages people to feel ashamed, and it encourages people to be perfectionistic. Over time, this can contribute to anxiety disorders, to depression, and to having a difficult time forming other intimate, healthy relationships, particularly romantic ones. My opinion, truly, unless you just are again trying to stay like morally accountable with like a pal of yours at church and you're doing it of your own volition, I just think it's important that people are provided with real help. If you're going to use a software like this, you should have a therapist that you're working with. You should be like, I think you should be working with someone, a clinical professional, a licensed professional should diagnose you or say, yes, you have a problem with viewing online adult content, and that's something that you need to work on. Because a lot of times, you guys, this goes into another video that I made called The Monetization of Sexual Shame, which is how the church does kind of try to convince everyone that they have a porn addiction. They just do. And so I think a lot of people use the word addiction when it's not appropriate, but it is something that the church really does sensationalize, and they do hugely monetize off of it. And so I think that it's important that if you're receiving feedback that you are an addict to this type of content, I think it's important that you go seek a professional's opinion. Even Covenant Eyes itself, they kind of word this in a bizarre way, but even them on their website says that, yeah, we acknowledge that this is not in the DSM-5 for everyone, and I'm not saying that it's not real, but for everyone that claims porn addiction, that is not something that is recognized clinically. But that's a really important distinction to make. And so I urge you guys, if you do ever hear feedback like that, if you're being told at your church that you have a problem, I think it's important to talk to somebody or look up, what does this actually entail? What is the actual criteria for addiction? Not what does my church say the criteria is, but go look up the literal definition of what addiction is and see, does this meet the criteria? I don't know that it couldn't get added in the future. Obviously, adult content is generally speaking new in the world.
Covenant Eyes started out as a simple tool. It started out as a simple app that was designed to protect families, to guide couples, and to enforce accountability for individuals. But I think what this reveals at the end of the day is something that is much bigger than technology. It's a window into Christian culture that tries to equate normal curiosity with a personal flaw or moral insufficiency. It reacts to normal development with fear and anger instead of understanding and love. For the people who use programs like Covenant Eyes, because there are many children, teens, couples, individuals, these apps promise them safety, but instead it gives them scrutiny. It demands their compliance while actively teaching them fear, shaming them to their peers, and turning ordinary questions or impulses or movie viewing on Hulu into data points that can be judged by people who don't understand. The consequences go much further beyond the screen. People who have used these programs know the anxiety, the shame, and the broken trust that can come with all of this. But this story isn't just about one software, one program, or one app. It's about an entire system. It's about a cultural ecosystem that profits from the fear of its users. It's about a cultural ecosystem that teaches self-surveillance as an absolute morality. It's a system that normalizes constant monitoring as care for your loved ones. Covenant Eyes is simply a reflection of that Christian system. It's just one tool that has helped to shape the anxieties in this culture. In the end, if you take away one thing, I want it to be this. Technology can be harmful. Tools that promise protection can also control you in the long run. Giving someone guidance without any compassion in your tone sounds a lot like judgment, and oversight without encouraging someone to use their autonomy becomes oppressive very quickly. Understanding the Covenant Eyes story means that we need to understand the culture behind it, and maybe by doing so, we can ultimately understand ourselves. How do we teach responsibility to our own children? How do we encourage it to others without also encouraging fear? How do we teach accountability without going into cancel culture territory? How do we guide curiosity without turning into a helicopter parent or spouse? How do we care for others without demanding that we control them? When you get down to the nitty-gritty of parenting or a relationship after betrayal, these questions aren't as easy to answer as they might seem on their face. The answers definitely don't come in the Covenant Eyes app, or in any report, or inside of any kind of dashboard. The answers are going to be found in building community, true connection, loving others without judgment, and allowing other people to be human, to make mistakes, to grow, to be curious about things, to fail, and to do all of that without being condemned, without feeling watched, and with the ability to move on from it. The answers can't be found in the Covenant Eyes app or in any software like it.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna say this and excuse my language. I don't fuck with no mega church. I think mega churches were designed to keep people poor. I'm not even gonna say black people because I know white people go to them too, but I'm just say people poor. The preacher got $100,000 in his mouth, veneers. I'm talking about when he smile, it go bling. And I know goddamn well y'all not paying tithes at a church and the pastor is pulling up in Maybachs and shit. What the fuck wrong with y'all? No, boo, he got the money. He got the money on him, goddamn it. And he got you too, though. So it don't even matter. No, think about this shit, bitch. Some people in his congregation ain't even got cars. This motherfucker pulling up in a car worth more than where they stay at. Some of these folks in here on Section 8. But y'all still get him y'all money? Okay. You Ubering at church. He in a goddamn Maybach. What the fuck is you not getting? No, bitch, tell him come get you. And I can't fuck with the new age gospel neither. How the fuck is we rapping? If we ain't rapping like old Kurt Franklin, honestly, turn that shit off. Like, they literally got y'all sitting in style, praising God.
I am a 25-year-old millionaire, so buy my course to make you a millionaire. And in the course, I teach you how to sell a course, because I'm only a millionaire because you bought the course, and now I teach you how to sell course, and then you can make course about how to sell course and sell it to more people. Course inception, and now everyone is a millionaire because we just buy course, make course. Buy course, make course, millionaire. Secret to life.
Maybe we're all so worried about getting in trouble because we keep trying to get each other in trouble. This week I've been writing about how everybody feels like everybody's mad at them, and I think it might have something to do with the fact that everybody's mad at each other online. I feel like so many of us have this mindset that everybody secretly hates them, or everybody is secretly mad at them, or they're about to get in big trouble. In any other era, that would be paranoid, but I think this era, it's actually a fairly common mindset, and I think it's actually kind of understandable. We're living in an era of unprecedented surveillance. We're effectively big brothering ourselves and each other every single day. You could go for a walk, you could go to work, you could go to a coffee shop, you could go to your friend's house, you could go to a concert, and you could be filmed unknowingly by someone on the street, you could be filmed by someone's glasses, you could be filmed by someone's doorbell. And suddenly that video could be posted online and reach thousands and even millions of people. And it's all completely out of your control. And that's just what we do in public. We willingly share so much of ourselves and the people around us on a day-to-day basis. We film ourselves crying on the internet, we document our children's lives, we share screenshots of arguments with boyfriends, with roommates. We share everything in the hopes of getting some engagement. And in that process, we open ourselves and the people around us to the court of public opinion online. And we know that the internet can be a very cruel place. I think the internet has proven that the advice, don't worry, nobody's thinking about you, is completely untrue. Because we can see from Reddit, we can see from the comment sections of any social media platform, we can see through Twitter that people are absolutely thinking the worst about you, worse than you probably thought about yourself. And even if you don't post, even if you just kind of observe, I think by watching how people interact online and knowing how people think about each other and treat each other, it has to have an effect on our brains. I think it's actually quite a reasonable thought that everybody is mad at you and hates you when everybody online is mad at each other and does hate each other. And I think in the back of our minds, we know that if you do something bad and you get caught, or you do something really embarrassing, you will have to pay some pretty hefty consequences online. If we think about the Coldplay couple, if we think about West Elm Caleb, if we think about Karens, if we think about all the people that got fired over tweets, I'm not saying that those people did nothing wrong, but they paid some pretty huge consequences. I think we often hide behind this idea that it's moral retribution, that they've done something bad, they deserve whatever comes to them, they're a scumbag, they're a cheater, they're whatever, they deserve whatever they get. But I think the danger in that is that morality changes. If you think about what was deemed good in the Roman times, in the medieval times, in the 50s, in the 80s, in the early 2000s, our idea of what's morally correct and acceptable is completely different. So political and religious shifts do happen, and we might be in the midst of one. And I think we don't know what the world looks like in 10 years, in 20 years. We don't know what we'll think is morally good. We don't know what the general consensus in a society, in a government, deems okay, deems acceptable. So are we comfortable with how we deal with people who have done something bad if our idea of what is bad changes? And once we've put so much of ourselves out onto the internet, once we've shared everything, we can't get that back. I think we have to ask ourselves, is this the environment that we all want to be in, where we all feel like we're in trouble and we all feel like everybody's mad at us and we think that everybody secretly hates us? Because I think we've already paid a pretty big price to live like this. If you're interested in this, I've written an essay about it on my Substack, and it's there with a lot of other stuff that